Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Kaelyn. I'm a recent graduate from UCLA. I'm heading off to graduate school, and today's video is all about tips for starting college. I was a transfer student at UCLA. I ended up going to community college and having a professional athletics career before going to college or to a four-year university, and I'm going to make a whole nother video about transferring and about community college, because I think that community college is also an excellent option for those that are on the fence. But if you've committed to a school, whether you're coming in as a freshman or a transfer, these tips will definitely apply for you and will be very helpful. And a few of these may also be applicable to those that are going into community college. Alright, I'm going to try to not ramble on and get right into it, but stick around to the very end because I think that my last tip is probably the most important of all. Number one, try to get out of your comfort zone and meet as many people as possible within the first week. So the first week that you're at college is usually kind of like the intro week or the freshers week or the 0 week, and that's usually the time where there's a bunch of events, there's a bunch of kind of get-togethers within the dorm, and that's kind of your time to really meet people and establish early friendships. I still talk to my friends from UCLA. Our first impressions were ultimately those initial interactions are going to lead to friendships later down the road. So meeting people when they're at their most social, and all students are kind of at their most vulnerable because you're new and you don't really know where things are. It's best to kind of just meet as many people as possible, establish a buddy system. I met my best friend and my roommate for senior year during the first week at UCLA. And I specifically remember we met up after going to this Westwood block party, and we ended up going back to my dorm and talking about the Titanic until 3 a.m. So I still have those memories of the first week, and I think that those are incredibly important. And even for people that are really introverted like myself, I was somebody that was incredibly shy, but ultimately everybody is kind of on the same page. You don't really know what's going on, so take advantage of that and meet as many people as possible. It's the time when everybody's going to be at their most social. Alright, number two, scope out all of the dining options early and try to figure out where all the healthy food is. Luckily at UCLA, the food was excellent and there were so many options, and for example, when I wanted to cut dairy out of my diet, I just went to certain dining halls that I could easily find options where dairy wasn't included. So I would scope out your dining situation, and if it isn't that good at your school, scope out things nearby. Try to figure out ways that you can get fast prep meals that you can keep in your dorm, in your mini fridge, things like that, just so you have options later down the road. Also scope out your favorite coffee shop on campus, because that will definitely be important, as well as figure out which ones are going to be the least crowded and which ones are not going to run out of your favorite items first thing in the morning. Alright, so number three is all about planning ahead. I know that some people don't really like to use a planner. I'm somebody that loves using a planner, but ultimately when you get your syllabus, you are basically tethered to that syllabus. And if there's anything within that that you don't remember, such as a due date or a preparatory due date, so sometimes professors will have you send the essay like a rough draft, and then they'll have you send the final draft. So make sure that you're aware of those dates, because those dates are incredibly important, and oftentimes there's a no late turn-in policy unless there is some kind of family emergency or you've been incredibly ill. So make sure that you're aware of those dates, make sure that you get them done on time, even if that's just plugging it into your phone or keeping it in a planner or a notebook, anywhere. But don't just read the syllabus and hope that your brain is going to remember those due dates. Write them down somewhere so that way you have that in memory. I will do a separate video on which planners I ended up using in college and which ones I think are the best ones for students. But for right now, I would say just get a planner that you think is going to work for you. Most people don't need like the day spread. You just need something that kind of keeps track of your assignments and your due dates and lectures. So number four is all about figuring out study methods that work for you. So everybody studies a little bit differently. I'm somebody that studies better at night or very early in the morning. My study schedule is a little erratic because I ended up taking more courses than and was recommended, and I also wrote an honors thesis while I was in undergrad, but you can kind of figure out which study schedule is going to work for you. And also, although you think that procrastination may be the method that works for you, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, not necessarily just because you don't want to do the assignment right now. I personally am somebody that if I can kind of push it off for a little while and I get just anxious enough about it, I don't leave it necessarily to the exact last minute. I will still be doing preparatory work up until then to make sure that I have all the tools that I need. But I am somebody that kind of pushes the envelope of when I should be getting a paper written, because I'm somebody that works best under pressure. And if I do the assignment right when it's assigned, which I could do and I have done, I just don't perform the best, and I ended up taking way more time to get it done. So the study method that works for me is to do as much preparatory work as I can beforehand. Whenever I am writing a paper, I will give myself enough time to write that paper as well as do a second edit and potentially a third edit. So that's just my advice for myself, but ultimately, you need to figure out which study patterns work for you, whether that's studying a little bit every day. I also only really had papers. I didn't have very many exams. So if you're somebody, for example, that's in STEM and you're going to have a lot of exams, you may want to study slightly different. You may want to kind of look back at your notes every day to make sure that you have that information tethered to memory. So tip number 5 is to walk. At UCLA, it was a walking school. There was really no way to ride bikes. Some people rode skateboards, but it is incredibly hilly, so it's very difficult to kind of get around by. Some people would take an Uber from the residential halls to the other side of campus. 1, that racks up a lot of money, and 2, you should really only use those times for when you're 1, carrying a bunch of textbooks, 2, are incredibly ill, or 3, you're running miserably late. But I wouldn't make a habit of it. In addition to that, as somebody that is now working a full-time job, I really miss getting to walk everywhere, honestly. It was a nice way to exercise. It was a nice way to get outside. And although there were days when you had to walk in the rain and it was cold, and if you're on the East Coast or in another country, you may have to walk through snow, I would just suggest trying to walk as much as you can. I was lazy and used to take my car to go get groceries, but sometimes looking back at it, I wish I had just walked, because I do miss having that as part of my daily routine now. So if you can, try to walk everywhere. Try not to spend a bunch of money on Uber. Believe me, you want to save that for late night snacks. Okay, number 6, get involved. So the first week they usually have like a college club fair, in which case you can get involved in student activities and student clubs, student government, but also you have the option of getting involved in your department. If you're somebody that's really academically driven like myself, I actually really enjoyed being able to spend time in the department and get to know my professors. When I was a kid, somebody told me that the best way to kind of gain recognition and to be known for your work is to always be seen and always be seen working. If you're constantly in the periphery of somebody that you really admire, eventually they're going to notice your work ethic and notice that instead of just showing up to class, you're also showing up at the department, you're seen on campus, and then you're obviously seen as a more diligent student. And then in terms of clubs, being involved in clubs is also important because 1, you gain networking connections through other people in the club as well as the adults who have organized clubs. And on top of that, that's something that you can put on your resume. It's a way to build friendships. It's a way to build community. And that's also something that's important. And if you're somebody that really wants to go into politics or you want to go into lobbying, then potentially getting into student government is going to be kind of your gateway into that environment and will also give you experience in that respect. So ultimately figure out what kind of clubs and organizations and departments you want to get involved in and just try to make as much time as you can for it, obviously without having it interfere with your studies. Okay, so number 7, I know everybody says this and it's kind of a cliche, but go to office hours. Talk to your professors, get to know them, because ultimately it will affect your grade. I did not go to office hours because I wanted it to affect my grade necessarily as much as I wanted to build relationships with my professors. I wanted to get to know them. I wanted them to know me and my research because ultimately I knew I was going to need letters of recommendation in the future. I knew from the get-go when I got to UCLA that I wanted to perform research and I wanted to go to law school. So one, I needed a professor that was interested enough in my research that they would take me on as a student. And two, I needed enough professors that liked me, were interested in my research, and were really invested in my future to write me letters of recommendation in the future. And that was something I was really quite concerned with from the get-go. And even if you're somebody that doesn't really know if you're going to be going to grad school, it's always nice to keep that option open. I have met so many people that have graduated from UCLA or graduated from another college, and a year or two down the road they're like, you know, I think I might want to go for an MBA, or I think I want to go for my master's, or I want to go to law school. But the problem is that they've never really connected with their professors, and they never really kept in touch with them. So ultimately, you're left in a situation where you don't have any letters of recommendation. And letters of recommendation are going to play a huge role in your graduate application. So that's something to consider, and something that you should keep in mind when you are heading into college, is kind of figuring out which professors you really admire and which ones you think you'd like to have write you a letter of recommendation. Alright, so number 8 is all about depression, homesickness, feelings of sadness, feelings of anxiety in college. So for many of you, this is the first time you're moving away from home. It was my first time moving out of the Bay Area, and it is totally normal to feel homesick, and it is totally normal to feel sad. And that first quarter was incredibly difficult for me. I'm somebody that really loves being home. I really love being around my friends and family. So being away at first was really fun, but after a little bit, I did realize how much I missed being home. One piece of advice that I can give is ultimately let yourself be sad. If you are feeling sad, if you're feeling homesick, give yourself a minute, go off on your own, let yourself feel that, but then move forward. I think oftentimes with college students, what kind of triggers this ongoing feeling of depression and ultimately can lead to a diagnosis of depression is a bit of denial of that homesickness and saying, well, I have assignments, I can't deal with that right now. So for me, I'm somebody that always allows myself to feel emotion, but for just as much time as is necessary. So ultimately, the advice there is allow yourself to feel emotion, do not bottle it up, but also try to figure out a system to allow yourself to feel those emotions and then move forward so that it doesn't completely consume your life and your studies. Especially as a first year student, that's just something that is likely to happen and that you should acknowledge, and it's perfectly normal. Alright, so number 9 is all about going out, parties, bars, etc. I personally never attended a frat party while I was at UCLA, and I do not regret that. Ultimately, going to parties is always going to put you at a slight risk. One, because alcohol is involved, and two, the unfortunate reality that sexual assault on college campuses, especially when alcohol is involved, has an increased likelihood. Also, as an attendee, and I'm not going to call out gender because sexual assault can happen to anyone, it is your responsibility to make sure that you are okay and that your friends are okay. Ultimately, and I may get some negative feedback on this, you have to watch out for each other. With your friends, just make sure that you're aware of where they are at a party at all times. Make sure that they're comfortable with the people that they're talking with. You know your friends best, and if they seem like they're uncomfortable with the conversation, especially with somebody that may be taking advantage of them, step in, and it's perfectly okay to do so. Ultimately, if you do also see somebody that may be in danger that is not your friend, it is your responsibility also to step in. I would never want to be in a situation where I thought somebody looked uncomfortable and I did nothing. When I was at UCLA, I was 22, and I did enjoy going out to bars with my friends, but I didn't make a huge habit of it. I think I maybe went out a total of 5 or 6 times when I was at UCLA, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go out and have fun. Ultimately, the weekends are the time where you can catch up on sleep, catch up on your schoolwork, as well as catch up with your friends and have fun. I would just recommend doing it in a safe way. And I just wanted to make sure that I put out that disclosure that you should be aware of your friends and that you should just be aware of yourself while you're at a party, simply because I think that it's not said enough and that we should all be accountable for one another, and we should try to help each other in any way that we can, especially when it's a situation where alcohol is involved and it is possible that somebody may be taken advantage of. All right, so this is my final tip. Number 10 is to trust your gut. College is an excellent opportunity to really learn who you are, what it is you really want, and what it is the things that you enjoy, and ultimately curate your life to be what you want it. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that you're doing it in a way that you feel is right, that is ethical. I look back on my college experience and I don't regret a single second of it. I did everything that I set out to do. I went above and beyond that. I was able to write a thesis I'm really proud of. I met friends that are lifelong, and I wouldn't trade up that experience for the world. I loved UCLA. And if you are somebody that has gotten into UCLA and you want more advice about the program or anything, please leave me a comment down below or shoot me a DM on Instagram. I would love to answer those questions, and I will include it in a future video if that is what you would enjoy. So now we've come to the end of the video. I really hope that you enjoyed this. I'm going to make another video about study tips for college students, so if that's something that you're more interested in, go ahead and stick around. And if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.